Hey everyone, welcome back to Realpolitik. Today is March the 14th, 2023, and we're going to be talking about the latest developments in Ukraine. So, in the Black Sea, there was a collision between a Russian Su-27 fighter jet and an American MQ-9 Reaper drone. Now, according to the Americans, before the collision, and there were actually two Russian Su-27s trailing the MQ-9, but anyways, before the collision, two Russian jets dumped fuel on and flew in front of the MQ-9 in a reckless, environmentally unsound, and unprofessional manner. So, obviously, the Americans are, flying drones in the Black Sea, trying to collect intelligence, pass it on to the Ukrainians, and the Russians weren't too happy about that. Now, the Russians are claiming that their jets did not collide with the propeller of the MQ-9, that they were just trailing the MQ-9 and the MQ-9 crashed by itself, but who knows? You can be the judge. There's no way to know for sure, right? So, anyways, going on to Bakhmut, let's actually use this map, right? And if we go back in time a bit, so you'll notice the Russians, they've, from the 10th, we'll go forward to the 11th, and the Russians have taken over all of the territory east of the Bakhmutska River. Then, of course, they continued consolidating in the south, if you look to the south right here. And then yesterday, they expanded this bulge closer. They've gotten even closer to one of the last roads in and out of Bakhmut. Of course, there's this road, right? In the south, you can see in yellow, and then there's this road right here. Let me just draw it in quickly. Okay. Yeah, so there's these two roads, and in both cases, they're within a kilometer, within rifle range of these roads, right? So basically, in the big picture, let's just go forward. So yeah, they're even closer to the road now. Look to the north right here, and you'll see that from yesterday till today, the Russians, the Wagner assault units, were actually able to seize the Vostokmash Steel Plant. Okay, if we zoom in, let me just get rid of this right here. Wait. Okay, so if we zoom in, you see in the gray, these buildings right here, these are all part of the Azom, with an M, steel processing facility. So this is the Azom steel processing facility, and this section that the Wagner assault units were able to seize is called the Vostokmash Steel Plant. And of course, this right here is compliments of Wagner PMC. And you can see a few months ago, Zelensky visited the Vostokmash Steel Plant, and you can see in the top right this looping pipe or whatever it is. And the top right here, this is from today. The soldiers of Wagner are posing in front of it. So during his visit, Zelensky actually said that Bakhmut is an impregnable fortress, something along those lines. And now they have actually stormed and seized the same facility where Zelensky gave his speech. All right, so now looking at the big picture, just like if you recall in Mariupol, there was the Azovstal steel plant, and the Azov battalion actually took refuge there. They barricaded themselves in when they were surrounded, and that lasted for a couple weeks, right? Now, just like Azovstal, the Azom steel plant has an extensive underground tunnel network, and I hate it when that happens. But anyways, yeah. So I think what the Russians are thinking is that if they do end up encircling Bakhmut, the remaining units stuck in the center of the city, they might decide to do the same thing. They might take refuge in the Azov steel processing facility. So the Russians are basically trying to flush them out before they become too entrenched, before they have time to fortify their positions within this facility. Now, looking at the big picture, as I mentioned, the Russians are really close to the two remaining roads in and out of Bakhmut. Okay, I'll draw it in again. Just give me a second. So there's this road I've colored in red, and then this road in yellow, right? Now, of course, the Russians are the Wagner PMC. They're pushing towards Kremove, and if they're able to seize the settlement of Kremove, they could keep pushing south. And then, of course, right here is where the MiG-17 monument was that was destroyed, and the Russians and Ukrainians blamed each other. But anyways, if the Russians push north from there, then they could meet somewhere in the middle, maybe at Kremove, maybe south of Kremove, and they could encircle the Ukrainians. Now, another possibility, which is pretty feasible, is, you see, this is the topographical map. You see just west of Kremove and west of Ivanivske, there's this ridge line, this elevated slope that goes from north to south, right? And if the Russians are able to take over all of the territory along this slope, then they could actually use the slope as a natural defensive barrier. Now, to do this, they would have to go through this forest area, right? And physically take control over the road here. But I mean, if the Russians are able to do this, they could use this as a natural defensive barrier, which would be a strong defense, which would be a very very good for defense. Now, aside from that, there are those who believe that the Russians, actually, let's go up north. And let's go back a few days. Okay. Now, this is the 8th. Okay, and you'll notice here this bulge right here. This is Dubovo-Vasilivka. The Ukrainians claim that the Russians attacked this settlement more than 30 times before they were able to seize it. But anyways, going forward in time, they did seize it eventually. From the 8th to the 10th, they seized it. And then look here to this highway. You will notice this bulge sticks out, right? And then what happens is they consolidate control and the bulge blooms. And I think what the Russians are trying to do here is they're pushing west. And obviously one settlement they're interested in is Orikovo-Vasilivka. But they would want to take all these settlements to the west. And the reason for that would be that there's a river line right here, and there's a road that runs parallel to this river line. I'll just highlight it. And basically, if the Russians can take over this river line, basically they could use this as a natural defensive barrier as well. And ideally, if they could take over the river line and this slope right here, this elevated ridge line, that would be very beneficial for them, right? Because they could use both the ridge line and the river line as natural defensive barriers. Of course, there are some pundits who believe that the Russians are trying to actually go west and bypass Chasiv Yar to the north and take over one of the settlements here, and then from the south also bypass Chasiv Yar and then encircle not only Bakhmut but also Chasiv Yar. But I don't know how feasible that is. I think this is a little far-fetched at this point, but only time will tell. Now, the Ukrainians, according to the Russians, are actually planning to launch a counterattack, okay? And the Ukrainians are building up their forces, accumulating troops, armored vehicles, artillery, whatever, all the weapons they can, and apparently they want to launch a counterattack. Now, they have a couple options, obviously. If let me bring this up to date. The Ukrainians could try to attack the Russians from the south, right? And maybe Klashivka to Opitne, right? And that would basically destroy the encirclement. Or they could go towards the settlement of Yahidne, and then they could try to get to this road right here. And by getting to this road, maybe getting to Krasnohora, eventually they could break the encirclement from the north, right? Now, ideally, if they could get to this intersection right here, then they could actually, there's some Ukrainian pundits who are saying that the Ukrainians should actually encircle the Russians. And I don't know how realistic that is, but hey, dreamers can dream, right? But I don't think that's very realistic for the Ukrainians to try to turn this encirclement into an to encircle the encirclement, right? So I don't know how feasible that is, but anyways, allegedly, apparently, the Russians are preparing their defenses. They're digging some trenches, and they're preparing themselves for a Ukrainian counterattack, apparently. So who knows? Only time will tell. But anyways, guys, that's it for today. If you watch till the end, please like and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one.